Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We're going to let people filter into the Zoom room. We've got a great webinar planned for this morning. I'm actually pretty surprised at the number of you who are excited about a Friday afternoon or morning webinar. We had nearly 200 people sign up for the webinar, and it looks like we've already got a ton of folks in our attendee room. So I guess the chat's wide open. So why don't we all, if you're up for it, introduce yourself, let us know where you're from. We're excited to be here today. I'm going to give it just a few more minutes, actually maybe like 20 seconds to let people filter into our Zoom room. And then we're going to get going talking about the EV outlook for 2025. All right, I see people putting their info in the chat. Hi, Dale. Hi, Lee. Hello, Beth. Yeah, throw in your name and where you're joining us from. I think we've got a really great geographic coverage on this morning's webinar, which is great because you know what? EVs are all over Minnesota, and this proves it. All right, with that, I think I'm going to get this show on the road. Hello and welcome to Fresh Energy's 2025 EV Outlook. This webinar today is hosted by Fresh Energy with Jukka Kukkonen from Shift2Electric. And I was thinking back, it's been a few years since we've had like an actual EV webinar. We've done blogs for the past few years, so it's really exciting to be back. My name is Jo Olson. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the lead director of communications and engagement at Fresh Energy. And like I said, if you're just joining us, go ahead and put your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. We've got great representation from all over the state and actually beyond. And I know a number of you have asked the question, will we be sharing a recording of this webinar? And the answer is absolutely. You'll get an email from me probably maybe today, probably Monday, with a link to the YouTube recording as well as the audio version on Fresh Energy's podcast. And excited that my amazing colleague Isaac Kwam will also be working his magic to turn this into a FAQ blog post as well. So I think that will be up in a week or two after today. And I know a ton of you submitted questions ahead when you registered for the webinar. We have them all written down. We're going to do our best to get through a lot of them. And we have questions that can be submitted in real time. So you can put them in the chat. I would recommend using the Q&A function. It's a button at the bottom of your screen. If you click it, it says Q&A. You can type in your question and then you can upvote other people's questions. So if you see someone asked something that maybe you were thinking about asking and you want to elevate it on the list, go ahead and give that a thumbs up. And I'm going to flip slides here. Now, I know many of you are, well, some of you are new to Fresh Energy. Welcome. If you don't know us, Fresh Energy has been working in clean energy and climate policy here in Minnesota and throughout the Midwest for more than 30 years. We're changing the world through bold policy solutions that move us to a just, carbon-free future, and we're helping everyone who lives here and dependence on fossil fuel electrify their lives and build a healthy, clean energy economy where everybody can thrive. And as you can see on the screen, we have an awful lot to cover today. So let's meet our presenters. I've got a great lineup here. We've got Jukka Kukkonen from Shift2Electric. We'll also hear from Fresh Energy's Anjali Bains and Nick Hague. Anjali leads Fresh Energy's transportation team, and Nick is a senior policy associate on that team and one of our newest staffers. So I'm really excited he can join us this morning. And now I'm going to turn things over to Anjali to give us a quick look at the transportation policy work in progress and on the horizon at Fresh Energy. Anjali,
Awesome.
take it away.
Thank you so much, Joe. And so weird to see everyone online today. I'm as excited as everyone else here to hear Yuka's take on current EV trends and shifts. But as Joe mentioned, I'm also really excited to reintroduce the transportation team here at Fresh Energy, which is now its own department, thanks to our new strategic framework that we'll go over in a little bit. And we now have 2 full-time staff on this team after being somewhat understaffed for the last few years. But first, a little refresh on why we are so focused on reducing climate emissions from the transportation sector. Here you can see MPCA data that's through 2020, which is a little bit out of date, but we expect the trends to remain the same, which is that the transportation sector is a larger contributor to climate emissions among all economic sectors in Minnesota. It's also true for the US and also contributes to a high amount of the global greenhouse gas emissions as well. And of that, personal vehicles make up almost 55% of transportation sector's emissions. So it's really a critical area that we still need to do more in order to electrify and get those emissions to come down. Next slide. So because of that really critical nature of addressing transportation, it is a department that has been elevated to its own team in our strategic framework that many folks may have seen at our benefit breakfast or may be seeing for the first time. But transportation is now at the same level as all the other economic sectors when it comes to how we think about building our team and organization to address it. Zooming in on transportation here. Great. You can see here that this is a quick summary of what we're really going to be working on, which is decarbonizing the movement of people and goods, prioritizing affordable, accessible, zero emissions technology and infrastructure with precise deployment of low carbon fuels. So that really is our whole team strategy in a nutshell. And because of the fact that personal vehicles make up more than half of transportation emissions, we are really honed in on using policy levers to invest in and expand adoption of personal electric vehicles and EV charging. When I first joined Fresh Energy 5 years ago, the focus was on things like passing clean car standards in order to get more of those personal EVs in the state. Fast forward, there are more options than ever and more EVs on the road here than ever before, as you will dive in. But as many of you are also very aware of, our charging infrastructure has not quite kept up, especially our public charging. So our team will be really, really focused on getting more EV charging built across the state, especially public charging and at-home charging. I'm working in partnerships like Drive Electric Minnesota and state agencies and at the state legislature. Of course, as you see here, our goal is to also make sure we're prioritizing access and affordability of zero emission vehicles. And that means we also want to work on policies that enable more Minnesotans to use electric vehicles that aren't just their own personal electric vehicles. To that end, we work in a group called the Coalition for Clean Transportation to advance both school bus electrification and transit bus electrification. Much of our work in that group over the coming years will be to get school districts even more comfortable and used to electric buses and making sure our largest transit agency, Metro Transit, has the resources it needs to electrify its fleet. We're also hoping to engage with transit providers beyond Metro Transit and identify new ways to support under-resourced customers who are spending a higher proportion of their income on gasoline to switch over to electric vehicles. Next slide. So I mentioned we work with state agencies, we work in coalition, we work at the state legislature. We also work at the Public Utilities Commission and with utilities to advance our electrification goals. And it's never been a better nor a more important time to dig in there. I'll hand it over to our newest member, Nick, who joined us in October to share more about that work.
Thanks, Anjali. So yeah, as mentioned, I've been with Fresh Energy for about 2 months now, and I'm really excited about the opportunities to help work on these issues. I'll be working primarily on advocating for more supportive EV policies at the Public Utilities Commission. So much great work has already been kickstarted by our Minnesota utilities, but there's also so much more room to grow. We're looking forward to seeing Minnesota Power, which is a northern Minnesota utility, bring forward a new pilot program on EV charging for multifamily unit buildings later this month. Next year, we're also expecting to have our work cut out for us, working on improving and fortifying existing pilots into more permanent programs, including things like school bus electrification. Next year is also the year that Minnesota utilities are set to release their next round of transportation electrification plans, which we're very excited to see.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think Nick and Anjali, would you be willing to put your email addresses in the chat in case anyone joining us today is interested in connecting on Fresh Energy's work? And Jukka, I think we're ready to turn things over to you. Technically, you're the star of the show, and I know you have a very robust deck to share with us today. So I want to give you as much time as possible and ensure we have plenty of time for Q&A. So it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Anjali, for all of that. Good start of this great webinar, and good morning from my perspective too to everyone. My name is Jukka Kukkonen. I'm a EV consultant with Fresh Energy, and my company is Shift2Electric. And I will share my screen to get going here with my slides, because as I said, we have quite a bit of stuff to get through here today. So now you should see it. All right, very good. Let's start with the bigger picture things here to get going. And Bloomberg New Energy Finance shared this kind of a graph earlier this year, and I think it's a very, very good graph for us to understand. And it's kind of like most of the people don't understand this, and it was eye-opening to me even see the graph, even though I knew this. But when you look at this and understand that we have actually hit the big internal combustion engine cars already in 2017. 2017 was the year when most internal combustion engine cars were sold, and after that, the trend line has been very clear at the number of those vehicle sales dropping. And it's pretty drastic, the change in recent years. It's not as drastic in the US, we'll come back to that soon, but if you look at that overall in global level, we are beyond this, we are beyond internal combustion engine cars in that way. And it's clear, we've been talking about this for years. If a technology is 4 times more efficient than traditional technology, it'll take over. It's just about time when it happens. That's what we are talking about. So looking at the market then, what's the EV sales look like globally right now? If you look at these numbers here, we are seeing very nice growth on EV sales globally. We've heard recently a lot of stories about EV sales dropping even. They haven't really dropped. Even in the US, they have slowed down quite a bit for various reasons, most of it to do with our economy and high interest rates and other things like that. But overall, in the world's level, this has not happened. We are seeing very strong growth there. And when you look at this, it's interesting to see where the growth is most happening. It's in China. China is making extremely good electric cars nowadays. They have really decided that they want to be a market leader in this one, and they are doing everything they can to do it. And I think that's a very wise decision by them. I remember in 2013, I think it was when I drove a first Chinese-made EV here, actually in Minnesota, and it was not a good car. It was really, really, really bad vehicle at that point. It's not like that anymore. These cars that they make right now in China, all the EVs, are comparable to any Western-made EVs. So, and they are selling pretty well in Europe already. So we can see them putting a lot of effort into this. And if you look at the number, they are selling over 10 million EVs this year in China. That's 50% of their market, roughly, a little over 50% of their market. And if you look at the Chinese car market in general, we here in US sell about 16 million light-duty vehicles this year. In China, the number is over 20 million. So they are bigger car market already than we are in here in the US, and half of their sales are in EVs. So that tells very clearly where things are going. And just to remind us that it would be foolish for us to try to slow down the progress, because we will be left behind when other countries are developing their competitive advantage in this space, which will be the future. So that's a good thing to remember when thinking about these things. If you look at what has happened in the US market this year, we can see that this is Alliance for Automotive Innovation, their graphs, and this is through Q2, so it's just this summer's numbers. They are showing that EV market has clearly slowed down. There's still some development, but it hasn't grown the same pace as it had before. As I said, one of the biggest reasons for that is the higher interest rates and other things. That has hit all the vehicle sales, but especially with EVs, because if you have you have to put more money into it, and there's some uncertainty in the market. Usually, people regress into the traditional choices, and that has kind of happened a little bit this year. But we will have a very strong December. I know that for many reasons. EV sales in December here will be the strongest that we've ever seen. and that will definitely take us over 10% line. So 10% of the new vehicles sold in the US this year will be electric. Minnesota EV sales, where are we with that? Well, this is again first 2 quarters numbers, so don't be alarmed by looking at the bar on the 2024 saying, oh, that's too low, what's happened? Well, that's just half of the year. So we have, at that point, we had 60,000 EVs on Minnesota roads. And the same thing there, if you look at 2018 bar, you're like, why is the 2018 bar here there so high? Well, that's because in this setup, they put all the first 6 years into that 2018. I don't know why that was done that way, but that's a good comparison point for us. Because if you look at the first 6 years from 2012 to 2018, when we started to have EVs here, 9,000 electric vehicles were sold in Minnesota. Now, if you look at 2024, in first 6 months, 10,000 electric vehicles were sold in Minnesota. So we sold the same amount in the first 6 months than we did the first 6 years. So that gives also a good comparison point us here. We if you want to look at the market share, then the purple graph is the right graph for you to look at. Last year we were at 6.8% market share in Minnesota. This year, if you look at that graph, we sold 10,000 already in the first 6 months. You can expect that to be over 20,000 easily this year. So we'll be definitely higher on a market share, maybe close to 8% or something like that. And right now, at this point in the middle of the year, we were just 4 percentage points behind Illinois. So we're very close to taking the top spot on the Midwest EV market share, and I think we might do it. So I'm looking forward when we start to see the numbers at the beginning of next year, what happened with this year. So if we did beat Illinois or not, but it's a competition is on. So that's what's happening. US Department of Transportation did share us this kind of a graph this summer. I thought this was very useful for us to kind of understand and really look into. You look at on-road passenger trips by trip distance in 2022, and under 10 miles, that was 73% of our trips were under 10 miles. 92% of our trips were under 25 miles. And over 150 miles, only 0.6% of our trips were on over 150 miles. I think this is a very clear example of what our driving looks like in real life when we start to think about it. Range has been a big discussion point over the years when you talk about the EVs, and used to be a bigger challenge when we had a shorter distance EVs available. Now, when average new EV range is over 270 miles, it's much less an issue in that. But when you look at this graph, you're like, wow, how often do we actually do long trips? It's not that often. So I would read this that way, that if you have more than 2 cars, or if you have 2 or more cars in your family, you should always have at least one EV. One of those should be EVs. That's at least one reading, because then you can choose the right car for right trips. And many people are just fine in being full EV household, like our household. So that's not an issue either. But if people are concerned, you can still keep one internal combustion engine cars, but start to move into EVs, one car at a time. And that's the way to do it. All right. Well, let's go to DC fast charging side of things, talking about the longer trips here. And we've been talking about standards, charging standards in previous years. And last year, other manufacturers started to announce that, okay, we are moving into Tesla standard. So we used to have a CCS standard and NACS standard. That was Tesla standard. Those were the 2 biggest standards in the US. And at the end of last year, manufacturers started to tell, all right, we are starting to move all to the same standard, which will be the NACS standard. Nowadays is SAE J3400 standard. So let's see where we are with that transition right now. So right now, the following vehicle manufacturers have access to NACS superchargers, so Tesla superchargers with NACS connector. And those are Ford, Rivian, General Motors, Polestar, and Volvo. And this list is growing all the time here. Polestar and Volvo just got the access last month. I know that Hyundai and Kia are expected to get that very soon too, and many others to follow. I think they already announced Nissan a couple of weeks ago that, hey, Nissan has an access, and then they pulled that back, said, oh, no, not yet. Still something to work out. But that will, different companies will be added to that list all the time here. And I'm expecting that before the end of next year, or end of next year, we will have pretty much everybody on that list. So then we are talking about the same standard for everyone. Everyone can use the NACS connectors and the supercharging stations, so they have access to all DC fast charging infrastructure in the US. For those vehicles that still have the CCS connector, there will be these adapters that you can use for your charging. So some of the manufacturers have actually given those to the drivers, that you can get this, or some of them have to buy it, and it's about $300 cost that it seems to be. I would recommend buying it from the manufacturer if possible. Then you know that it's approved by them. There are third-party connectors, adapters also available, but be considerate when you think about those options to make sure that they are meeting all the safety standards, and that if they are even approved by your manufacturer, then that's possible too. But using the adapter will enable you then to use the Tesla supercharging station, and there's a picture of the supercharging stations there. What the older ones are the ones on the right there. They say that there's a black color. If you find black color, then you can use that. The new ones that are there in the picture are also available for everyone. Well, you don't necessarily have to go to each station and find if it has the black color there on the connector there. You just use your apps. So I've been talking with some of the EV owners recently about what are the apps like. They used to be a little clunky in the past, but they have improved a lot in recent years. So you just use your car display and say, I even need to find a DC fast charger. Tell me where it is. And I, for example, spoke with one Chevy Bolt EV owner yesterday and asked what his experience has been. He's like, yep, nowadays I just use the car app and my phone app, and that's all I need. I'm not necessarily have to use PlugShare or others anymore the same way as I used before. So that has helped a lot. So no need to check everything. You can just use your apps and you can find the right connectors there, right stations that you can use. Tesla stations, just to give you an update where we are with that, in Minnesota, they have 32 locations in Minnesota, and out of those 20 have been upgraded so that they can be used by all of these other makes and models. So, and Tesla keeps updating them all the time, upgrading them to a level that you can use those. Then when we think about the car side, is if you're right now using adapters, how about what happens in the future? And these same manufacturers that have now access are gonna also be building their cars in the future just using the J3400 plug, NACS plug. And good example of that is the new 2025 Kia EV6. Kia just announced that their new Kia EV6 will have natively the 3400 plug or outlet there in the car, and can use the stations natively there. And they are actually moving the plug also to the drive. It was on the back panel on the right side of the car. Now they are moving the left side to the driver's side, because that's where these Tesla plugs are Teslas. So then they use the same way the charging infrastructure as Tesla have worked. So it starts to work better for everyone. So good development there, and going forward. Looking at the DC fast charging infrastructure in Minnesota, we were at the end of 2023, we were at 468 plugs. And now in the summer, this summer, we were at 634 plugs. I was kind of, when we wrote the EV outlook for this year, I was kind of assuming and hoping that we would get about 800 till the end of this year. I don't know if we get all the way to 800, but my best guess is that we will be over 700, which starts to be a pretty good number. That actually starts to provide a good reach for DC fast charging in Minnesota. You still have to think about your driving. when you are in rural Minnesota. No question about that. It's not like, okay, I just start driving and I'll just go to International Falls and don't have to think about it. No, you have to do some planning. That's how the life still is. But I think the numbers where we are is starting to get quite good. I would say if we would be about 1,200, then it would be good compared to really good. Ideally, that's what I would like to see a number compared to the number of the vehicles we have right now. So we are behind, but we are making good progress. And when we compare to the whole US, I would say we are above average, which of course, as Minnesotans, we always want to be. Let's look at some examples of DC fast charging locations and talk about how this has developed and how it will continue to develop. Tesla superchargers have been in the past located in and still continue to be located in where there's some kind of other services, restaurants, grocery stores, and other things. And they have kind of set the gold standard of how we should do this. It has been very, very good to see. And here's a good example of that. This is actually on the parking lot of Midway Target here, closest to my home. And you can see that they have a good number of DC fast charging stations. They even have a couple of level 2s there to add that. And this is what we will be seeing more and more. When you look at how the things have developed in Europe, where they are a few years ahead of us when it comes to adoption, all the biggest grocery store chains, for example, are starting to install DC fast charging on their parking lots. That can be very visible. For example, my country of origin, Finland, where they have about 300,000 EVs now on the road. So they have 6 times more EVs on their roads right now than what we have here. It's a good way to look at where we are going, and very similar in driving ways and size wise and as a country. So there, in my small hometown, which has 30,000 people lives there, the biggest grocery stores just a couple of years ago, maybe one of them had DC fast charging on them. Nowadays, all of them do. So and even the mid-sized grocery stores start to have DC fast charging on their parking lot. So when we think about the refueling, we will start to see grocery stores, convenience stores, and others really pick up this and start to go with it because it makes sense for them to provide it. Looking at other setups here in Minnesota, here's a picture of going from Twin Cities to Duluth. This is in Pine City. There are actually 3 different DC fast charging locations in Pine City. This is one of them. Electrify America has installed these stations on the parking lot of Walmart there. So again, grocery store chain there, having DC fast charging there. And the idea there's more than one station. We used to have just one station location. That's not good enough. You have to have redundancy there. And it is a good example of that. Here's another interesting installation, which will be very popular. This has been waited for a long time. This is in Duluth. Duluth has been a little, they haven't had too many DC fast charging stations in Duluth in the past. Now things are changing quite fast there. And here's one of the first ones that have opened there. This is on Menards parking lot, just south of downtown Duluth. And as you can see, that's an interesting setup that they have there. They have more than this. They have, I think, like 8 stations, something like that there in that location. But these stations are set up so that they are so-called drive-through. So you can go and drive there even if you're hauling your boat or other trailer behind you. You can just go there, park, and just charge your car and continue without having to do any extra steps. So those are very valuable, especially in rural Minnesota, where you will be pulling trailers much more to have these kind of drive-through options. Then we can see the convenience store chains adding DC fast charging. Here's a good example of Quick Trip starting to add their stations. This is on the other side of the border from Wisconsin, this installation, but I know that Quick Trip will be doing the same kind of installations in Minnesota next year. So this is just a good example for us to see how they are doing it. I think that's a very good setup, even with under the canopy there. Circle K on their holiday stations has already started to do installations in Minnesota. We have several of these installations already, so DC fast charging as part of their offering there at their lots. And then one of my favorite locations, this is here in Twin Cities Metro on Como Avenue. There's this retro gas station called Nelson Outer World, and they added 400 kilowatt charging infrastructure there, DC fast charging on their small lot. They were able to do it. That's a kind of cool spot, so go check it out if you haven't seen it yet. All right, going from DC fast charging then to the other way around. How about powering your house or your loads, or even providing power back to grid from EVs? Another interesting thing that we've been talking for years, like, okay, it's coming soon. You can do this and this and these things with it. Great. But now we are actually starting to see the real options for us. And I was actually a little surprised about how many of them, I knew that many of them have the capability. When I started to put the list together for this webinar, about almost a third of our new EVs that are sold can provide vehicle to something capability. So vehicle to everything V2X is the idea. So you can use your car or truck as a power bank to power something else. And just your imagination is a limit how you can use this setup. So some terminology here. So V2G means vehicle to grid. We don't see too much of this yet, so that the grid providers, utility companies would be taking advantage of this one. In the future, we will probably start to see more of that, but right now, not too much of that. We're starting to see some vehicle to home, V2H setups, where you will be connecting your car to provide a power for you if there's a power outage. That's a very, very good way to do that. And then vehicle to load is probably the most easiest way to use this, where it can power a number of things with this setup. So some of the examples here, we have a Chevrolet Silverado there, and that truck has 720 and 240 volt outlets in it. Think about that truck has 7 outlets in it and providing total of 7.2 kilowatts of power. So you can power quite a bit of different things with it. And it also has a vehicle to home capability of 10.2 kilowatts. That could also be used for vehicle to grid if needed. But that truck has over 200 kilowatt hour battery pack and 10.2 kilowatts. I was just thinking about my own house. That could easily run my house for a week, over a week, very easily, without me doing anything different for my house, just running everything as is, even charging my cars probably. But it's amazing how much power it has there. And then you look at Ford F-150 Lightning, that has 1,120 or 240 volt outlets up to 9.6 kilowatts, and then also vehicle to home capability. The middle picture here shows a picture of that. If you are, for example, a contractor working with different kind of tools, you just go to your job site, take the tools out, start using them, plug them in, start using them, and you don't even notice probably at the end of the day. Maybe a few percentage you've lost, but not much. You really can't run down the battery too much by using those. And then Lucid Air, that is the lowest picture here. For example, in that one, you can use the charging cord by buying a separate little adapter for it, and you can charge another EV with it. So you can provide 9.6 kilowatt power for it. So if someone is low on charging, you can just plug your car into that car and provide them about 30 miles of driving range in an hour with that setup. So that's pretty handy too. And even smaller Kia EV6, well, it's not really small, but smaller than some of the bigger trucks, can provide vehicle to load capabilities. It can have 120 volt outlet inside, and then you can plug in a small adapter to it where you can provide 120 volt, 3.6 kilowatts of power out of it. And then of course there's a list of others, and that list keeps growing. So we just have to think about how we are going to use this in the future. It's very, very useful feature for many things. All right, how about the vehicles? What do we have right now available in the market? Anjali already talked there about the clean cars rulemaking that went through a couple of years ago, and that has really helped for us so that we can see good number of models and a good availability of them also here in the Minnesota. So we have now in our EV info list, we have 8 pages and 94 models. Just looking forward to getting to 100 here. Over 1,500 data points. 92% of the EV models are available with all-wheel drive. That is a very important thing. People say, well, how these work in the wintertime? Well, 92% of the models are available with all-wheel drive. So they're very, very good from that perspective too. 44 models can provide towing capacity. 6 pickup trucks are available, 10 three-row SUVs or minivans, and then average 0 to 60 miles per hour acceleration is 5.3 seconds. Of course, everybody remembers that the most important thing number that you use to choose your car is the 0 to 60 miles per hour acceleration, and it's really good in these EVs. I'll give you one perspective to this one. When I was growing up in 80s, we were all looking at like this magical, the best supercar in the world. That was Lamborghini Countach. And we were like, oh, that would be so fast and quick and so dreamy car for everyone. And really, really our dream car. Guess what the 0 to 60 miles per hour acceleration of that car was? 5.3 seconds from 0 to 60. So nowadays, your average family EV has the same kind of acceleration as the coolest supercar did in 80s. So just to give you a perspective there. All right. Why now is a very good time to get an EV, either new or used? It really is. First of all, we have very good availability of new EVs. I already mentioned that. There's of course uncertainty about tax incentives. What happens to those next year? Who knows? I don't have a. I really don't know. It doesn't look very promising. They might go away. So you have 1 month here. That take advantage of here. There are awesome leasing deals. I'll show you information about that on the next slide there. There's also much improved availability of the used EVs because we have been increasing sales of new EVs. The number of used EVs on the market has increased too. That's one thing that is clear. You always have to sell the new EVs first to get the used EVs. And many people are afraid of high mileage EVs. And if you know what you're doing, you know what to buy, high mileage EV might not be a bad choice. So you might get a really good deal on those ones. I've kind of tried to take advantage of that myself with my car. And always remember it, no matter what you drive, when you switch to getting a new or used EV, your current vehicle will take a really bad polluter out of the road. So even if you're driving like a newer Toyota Prius and you say this to get so good mileage and I want to keep it till the end of the times, I mean as long as I can, like don't. Just change to a new or used EV. Someone else will get that car. They will be replacing some bad polluter and put that out the road. And it's just a very positive cycle. So changing car to a new one, you should do that rather than try keeping that same car for ages because it's not going the way. Someone else takes advantage of it and takes bad polluter out of the road. And sooner you get an EV is better for you, for your neighborhood, for Minnesota definitely, for US and the whole world. That's just how it is. All right, awesome leasing deals. There are some incredible leasing deals right now on EVs. I have leased 2 EVs in our family. We leased 2012 Nissan Leaf and 2016 Nissan Leaf. For both of those, we paid over $400 a month, which we thought was a very good deal, and it was a very good deal. We actually ended up doing better with the leasing deal than if we would have purchased those cars. So leasing was a better option for those. But when you look at these now, what we have available, this is just ridiculously good. You can get Kia EV6 or Hyundai Ioniq 5 for like less than $200. Of course, if you start to add some features there, you might go a little higher, but still the base price is really, really, really good there. New Chevrolet Equinox EV that is brand new model in the market, $300 a month. Same with the Nissan Ariya and even the Rivian R1T, $620 starting per month. Really awesome deals here. And this is true for all the EVs. These are just examples here. So check out the manufacturers' websites and find what kind of deals they have and then talk with the dealers who can provide you these deals. But if I would have anyone who's have any inclination in looking at the new cars, this is what I would go for. I would just lease something right now, because if the tax credits go away, leasing deals will not be even close to this good, because why the deals are so good, leasing companies can take that 7,500 tax credit for all EVs, and that's why they can provide really good deals. So that's how it is. There's also a very good used market, as we spoke, more models available. I would start with the Facebook Marketplace. Look at that, what the cars.com might have for you. Those are mostly for the dealers' cars there. Then one tip here, Hertz is actually lowering the number of EVs on their fleets. So they have very good EVs available on their website. So check also what they have to offer. And then our favorite used car dealership here in town, GS Motors in Hopkins, where Pavel Ignatovich has been selling used EVs for probably 10 years now. And the good thing about that is that you can go there and test drive different EVs. Like here we have Chevy Bolts, Kia Niros. He usually has Kia EV6s there, Volkswagen ID4s and Honda Ioniq 5s and stuff like that. You can just go and test drive different ones and see which one you like the best, and then make your decision. And of course, Pavel's customer service is great, so he's always happy to help people. So think about that too. And then our story, very quickly, I'll share a quick story about what we have done in our family recently with EVs. We bought this Nissan Leaf 2013, 5 years ago, when our daughter was getting her driver's permit. We paid $7,500 for it. My daughter drove it for 2.5 years. Then when she went to college, then our son actually got the driver's permit, and he has been driving it ever since. So we have used this car for 5 years now. I now sold it for $4,000. I could have probably gotten $5,000 for it, but I didn't want to push it. And it found a really nice home with the family that hadn't owned an EV before. So they were new to EVs. So good example, someone who didn't even know much about EVs decided to get one. And I explained them very clearly that this is a shorter range car. But that was fine for them because they have other vehicles in their family. So that'll probably be used by their youngsters for in the future. And then we got Chevy Bolt 2019 for our family. This car has 140,000 miles on it. So it's one of those high mileage EVs, but I went through it and technically it's in great shape. No problems whatsoever. So I'm pretty happy with this. We paid $8,500 for it. So moving from Nissan Leaf to this one was $4,500. We have 6 years newer car and over 200 miles of range. Excellent for that. So just to give you an example of this. And when I was selling our Leaf, we had discussions with many people who didn't know much about EVs, but they realized that this is actually going to be a good option for them. So affordable used EVs are a great option for many people. And then one more thing, electric school buses to rescue. This is an important thing that I think we should always keep in mind. Right now, there are nearly 5,000 electric school buses on US roads, and more than 250,000 students are already riding these buses. That means that they are free from toxic fumes of diesel burning school buses. This is really important. If you're interested in the topic, look at more information from the Electric School Bus Initiative.org and our local mn350.org. They have electric school buses program there too. In Minnesota, we have dozens of electric school buses already, and already signed over 100 deals. So we should see those in service very soon, but very important development for everyone. And then I'll just give you a little teaser what we are going to do this spring. We already agreed that we'll be doing a springtime webinar, electric watercrafts. This is a very exciting thing that I've toyed around a little bit. That's my boat there on lower right corner there, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you how electric watercrafts are now used, both in public transportation and then for recreational uses too, and how you can do that yourself. All right, I think that's it. Joe,
Jukka, I'm really excited for the boat webinar, just for everyone on the call today. Yuka gave me a sneak peek at the presentation, and it's pretty cool. There's a lot of video, which I love. Cool boats doing cool things. All right, I'm going to share my screen quick. We're about to launch into the Q&A, but I wanted to remind people you can sign up for updates from Fresh Energy. Just go to fresh-energy.org/subscribe. And for those of you who love getting an inside scoop on the legislative session, we are having our second ever Loggers and Legislation Party on January 14th. This year is going to be at Utapils. It's actually on the first day of session, which is kind of perfect. So we don't have anything on the website yet. I just wanted to make sure this group kind of mentally saves the date and looks for more information from us soon. And then, of course, you guys, it's the end of the year. You could support Fresh Energy in your end of the year giving, but I bet you already knew that. So you can scan that QR code or visit our website to make a donation today. And gosh, with that, I feel like I'm ready to get into questions. Are you ready, Yuka? Because there's a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I think we're in 30 to 40 question zone. So we'll try to do some lightning round style questions.
I'm not very good at lightning rounds, but I do my best. You know this.
Well, we'll do our best. So let's start with Lynn M says, I've seen a large increase in fast chargers at auto dealers in Wisconsin. Do you expect this to continue? And what can you tell us about what these charges are open to the public? Lynn says they found some open and others closed, but not noted as closed on PlugShare, which is problematic.
Yeah, dealers have done investments. All the manufacturers did put a big requirements last year and year before for dealers to add some charging infrastructure in those places. So a good portion of dealers have done that. The challenge, of course, is that they don't really tell how they are using it. There might not be most of them don't have a payment option, so that's a challenging thing there too. So you don't really know how they are used. So I would say recommend that if you would consider using them, go walk inside and ask if there's permission for you to use them, and then you know what their idea with those are. But it's a little gray area there in many ways.
Smart. That's a great tip. Okay, so now I've got another one, and this one's from Joshua H. So Joshua is wondering, what is the best place to start for a non-techie? Start with an EV or a plug-in hybrid as a first-time buyer? Like, what are the resources? Who should they talk to?
Well, my recommendation always is talk to EV owners. If you know anyone who owns an EV, just reach out to them and say, okay, what have your experience been like owning, driving, and charging your EV here? That's always the best place to get the information. And of course, we have the EV info list. We have MNEV buyer website where you can find more information about different things and resources. So check those out too. But always talking with owner is the best way to go.
And I think I was actually just telling Nick about this before we launched the webinar today. The MNEV owners user group on Facebook is actually one of the most robust and active communities of EV users online that I've ever seen. So if you are a Facebook user, if you go to the website that Yuka mentioned, I think there's a link on there to the Facebook group too, right, Yuka? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there is, and that's true. I mean, if you don't happen to know one, just reach out to EV owners that way. That's also
Okay.
of course, a good way to do that.
Well, gosh, I've got an awful lot of charger questions. So let's see what we can rip through here. I know. So Jim is asking, does repeated DC fast charging have a negative effect on battery life and performance?
For most use cases, no. And for most cars, no. I think when we look at some of the heavy users from Europe, we've seen that sometimes it can be challenging if, for example, that vehicle has been in a taxi usage and they have solely used DC fast charging, especially in a warmer countries. That can have a negative impact. We don't have too much of that in the US yet, so I wouldn't be too concerned about it when you think about the used EV, but it's always good to see if you can get an EV battery report, state of health report from that battery. Again, we'll little behind of that here in the US, but in Europe, more and more options on that.
Well, so then Beth K is asking, where can you get those V to X adapters?
So usually it's a manufacturer where you can get them. There starts to be some third-party options too, but I would always start with the manufacturer's approved systems.
Okay. Well then, I've got another question, and this one's just from a group called Research Team, so I'm pretty impressed by their name. Can you talk about the state of NACS bidirectional charging?
If we are talking about Tesla specifically, Tesla hasn't really moved into that direction yet. But I've just read a story that someone was just third-party company was just offering that option. So sooner or later, the genie is out of the bottle. Everybody has to offer that very soon. So that's what we can expect.
Okay. All right. So then Tesla aside, Philip is asking what non-Tesla level 3 charging networks in Minnesota do you recommend? Do you have a fave, Yuka?
Different charging networks have different locations. So it's sometimes I wouldn't too much think about different charging networks. I would look at where am I going and what's available in those routes. You kind of have to do it that way right now. It's a different thing in some places like where we are more advanced. In Europe, like in Finland, I could actually choose between two networks and I could drive through the Finland by using that. We are not there yet. We have to choose where we're going and look at, okay, what are the charging stations that are available on this trip and then use those. So
Sure.
that's kind of my approach to it.
All right. Well, speaking of charging stations, I have a question from Craig F asking how many charging stations have been installed with Biden administration money up to now, and through the end of 2024?
In Minnesota, we have just the first round of funding being approved, or the first round gone through. Now the second round is open till the January 13th, if I remember right. The first round installations start this spring when the ground thaws. So we can expect next year to have the first installations going in.
Sure.
That process took quite a bit of time. And reason for that is that they try to make sure that it's technically correct, that it works for everyone, and it's a very good process. And I have to say that I'm very impressed by what kind of a setup they provided there. They have the 4 plugs, 150 kilowatts simultaneous from all those 4 plugs, and this is how you do it. So I think they have done a good job with it. Sometimes it takes a little longer to make sure that you do a really good job with it and have it at a level. So therefore, we see the first phase installation starting next year, next spring, and then continue from there.
Okay. Let's take a breath from charging and talk about a few other things. We'll come back to charging, but
Okay.
let's have a quick change of pace. So David D comments that his 7-year-old Leaf's battery and capacity and range, of course, is decreasing. So what would you recommend given that Nissan only warranties for 10 years? What are the environmental and personal costs at the end of these 10 years for either restoring or recycling the battery, or trading in the entire car for a new EV? And you were kind of in this situation, a bit,
yeah,
right?
our range is lower, but we still had like 70% of the or 75% of the battery left. So that started to be a little challenging for our teenagers because sometimes they wanted to go further. All right. It depends
Teenagers.
if you just want to use it for commuting and you know your route, it still might be fine for you, and that's okay. But the good news is that, first of all the batteries will always be recycled. None of them will go into landfill, so don't worry about it. When they will be taken off the car and they'll go into recycling because they're so valuable, and they will be changed into to build new batteries. That's a good thing about it. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. But we have now starting to see the third-party options for replacing your battery. And I just heard recently that our friends at the Foreign Service in Roseville, that is a shop there, is now doing upgrades to Leaf batteries. So they have already done a couple that they take the old battery out, they put a new bigger battery to replace it, and you might get 200 miles range to your old Leaf, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, that's like a new car almost.
Yep.
Okay, well, speaking of batteries, Jennifer S. is asking, what special considerations do I need to have considering Minnesota's cold climate and its impact on EV battery miles per charge?
Well, you just have to be aware that in the wintertime you'll get the less range. That's just how it is. As long as you're aware of that, we're fine. Depends a little bit of how big of a battery you have in your EV, but just a rule of thumb, about 30% drop on range in a worst case scenarios, I would say, usually. So keep your car plugged, charge it where you need to, use preheating to use less of the battery for the heating, and of course your convenience too, and then learn how your car behaves. It'll be fine.
Sure. Okay, well, I've got a question here from Satish, which I think you talked about a little bit in the presentation. Like ultimately right now, we don't know what we don't know about next year. So Satish asks, what are prospects for EV incentives under the incoming administration? Like
Well,
I said, we don't know what we don't know, but
we don't
yeah.
necessarily know too much about it, but it doesn't look very promising. If you think about that, Elon Musk is a big part of this new administration, and he, of course, is a EV, very heavily involved in EVs, and he's saying we should drop the EV tax credit. So I think that gives us a pretty good sign where things are probably going to go.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, here's a question from Jim. So you highlighted in your presentation, Jukka, some hot EV leasing deals that are currently in the works, but Jim is wondering, I'm kind of reading between the lines here, are any of those deals like too good to be true? Are there red flags to watch for with EV leasing deals?
What I would do definitely is I would start from the manufacturer's website, and I would look at what do they promise in the manufacturer's website, and then start calling through the dealers and see which ones actually have the vehicles that could get a lower deal. And that lower deal, if you're just looking the best price, start calling through the dealers, and when you find, and this is also good for if you're thinking of even buying any vehicle, is call through the dealers, find a person that you feel like is good salesperson for this one that you like working with, and if they have a vehicle that they could provide you those deals, then you should walk in. I would not go to dealers before I've talked to at least half a dozen dealers over the phone and decided where do I want to go. That's the best way to do it. Then you know that know more, and you've done a little bit more of your homework and see what they can offer for you.
And then you're not chasing around town, wasting time too, because no one wants to spend a Saturday afternoon at a car dealership, at least speaking for
Well,
myself.
some people like it, but
I
truthfully,
mean, they
when
have
you go,
cookies, but
yeah, they do. When you go to the dealership has always the advantage. When you're talking over the phone, you have the advantage. So take that advantage.
it's great insight. Okay, I have a question from Michael that I think the Fresh Energy team, Anjali and Nick, might have a few thoughts on, but we'll start with you, Jukka. So the question is, what is the extent and validity of insurance company concerns about level 2 chargers in multifamily buildings? Now, we do know that this is a pain point for EV adoption. So Jukka, maybe you can kick us off, and if Anjali and Nick have anything to add, they can jump in.
Insurance companies are facing tough times now from many perspectives. Not to the climate change impacts not being the least of them. So they are really looking into different ways of how they mitigate their risks. And one of the things they have raised is like, what's the risk of EVs in these multi-housing developments? We don't have any really cases where that risk would have materialized in the US, but understandable that they calculate their risks and try to look at it. So it's a little hard to tell. As with any insurance cases, you just have to be shopping around, find the companies that can provide you what you're looking for, and that's how I do it.
And
Perfect.
Jukka,
Well,
you and I were talking over text about how the way chargers are installed, or outlets are installed, can also help reduce the risk of fire that these insurance companies are focused on. So it seems like understanding how best to install outlets to support charging in multifamily will be important, and then educating insurance companies on those differences.
Yeah, definitely professional installations for all of that, making sure that, and I would also try to recommend. I mean, I would recommend everybody doing hardwired installations at least even in semi-public spaces like these are, because then the plug standards, unfortunately, are not the best in the US. So therefore, hardwired is always the safest way to go.
All right, maybe Fresh Energy team wants to stay on for this question too. It's like clean cars related. So Lee says a staff member of Representative Finstead told Lee yesterday that Rochester car dealers are complaining about having to be forced to sell EVs. So I guess, big picture question, have we seen more cooperation from Minnesota car dealers lately? I mean, we are in like what, 1, 2, 3 years into clean cars. What does this group think about that?
Well, I'll start with that and saying, of course, right now with car market slowing a little bit on all the levels, dealers have challenges. If there's any challenges, there's always like, well, maybe it's this because of this or that. Car market is always cyclical. I mean, having been working in this industry for a few years now, the car market is always cyclical. Sometimes things go really fast, and sometimes selling is easy, and sometimes it's harder, and even some models go up and down and all of that. And recently, of course, we have seen slower sales of EVs, and that has probably provided little challenges for the dealers. So, and dealers are very vocal about their opinions about things, and if sometime comes a really good time when they sell it, then they won't be complaining about it. But it just keeps on going up and down. So that's just normal business, normal chatter, I would say, in the business.
I agree with Jukka, and I will say, the Minnesota Auto Dealers Association, MATA, is part of Drive Electric Minnesota. So that's a coalition of groups that really focus on supporting EV charging and EV adoption through policies. So they are an active member of that, and they have hired someone to lead sort of their EV charge. So they are aware that this is a feature and have staffed up release to support that transition.
Great. And I think I've got kind of a related-ish question from Kevin, just asking about how the Clean Cars rule impacts car sales in Minnesota. I think we kind of addressed that, unless anyone has any kind of final thoughts on that. Okay.
Well, I was thinking that, so the way model years work is that a model year doesn't always line up with calendar year. So because Clean Cars was in effect through model year 2025, a lot of those cars were actually sold in this current calendar year. So we are seeing the effects of Clean Cars in that more dealers are getting those EVs on their lots. And if I remember correctly, I believe Clean Cars required at least 8% of EV sales to be electric by model year 2025, so about this year. So you get to your graph showing that we might hit 8%. That is very exciting to see that policy has come into play and actually supported some more EVs on lots, and then EVs being adopted too. So it is great to see that result.
Okay. Perfect. I know we're 3 minutes over time. Sorry about that. I know, Jukka, I think you're available for 15 more minutes. Maybe the Fresh Energy team is too. I want to respect people's time, like go have lunch if you want, but we're going to keep the conversation going. If you have to hop off, remember you'll get the recording probably on Monday, like I said, if I'm being realistic. So let's keep up with the lightning round. For those of you who can join us, that would be great. It looks like we've still got about 80 people in the call, and the questions keep rolling in. All right, Fresh Energy, you guys can maybe take a breather for a minute. I'm gonna pepper Jukka with some more technical questions.
Great.
Jim is asking if you can recommend a level 2 charger for home use.
I would say that there are a really good number of good level 2 chargers for home use. Just make sure that it's UL listed and that it's and read the reviews. We have, of course, one local manufacturer here, EvoCharge, that is Minnesota-based level 2 charging station manufacturer. So check out their offering.
Perfect. And another one, like home charging related from Steve. I added a 240-volt outlet in my garage to charge my Tesla via the power cord that came with the car. What are the advantages of putting in a different charging connection like Tesla or someone else supplies?
It really works well if you have a good 240-volt installation there with even with the outlet. I've used that for years myself. So there really isn't a huge amount of advantages. I would say the best advantage for you is that if you are traveling a lot and you want to keep that cord with you, just in case, if you have a hardwired setup at home, then you can keep that in the back of your car all the time, and you don't have to take it with you. So that I think is the best way. When I was traveling more, I did definitely enjoy having the portable cord in my car, just in case I needed it somewhere.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, Beth has another charging question. This one's more about networks. So Beth is asking, what percent of the DCFC network is actually working? Numbers of stations is important and functioning stations. As personally someone who's been skunked, I'm interested in your answer to this
Yeah,
one.
definitely a good question and a good thing to think about here. We have had some challenges with the older so-called first generation DC fast charging installations where you just have a one charging station in one location, and unfortunately some of the DC fast charging manufacturers are not selling their units anymore. They are not in business anymore. So some of the network owners have hard time finding parts for those stations. So we need to upgrade those old sites to a newer hardware, which is much more reliable. And we should add redundancy to those so that we will have more than just a 1 or 2 plugs there, 4 plugs the minimum, I would say, so that they are more reliable in the future. There is funding, or federal funding. There has been a federal funding, and I'm sure there will be another round of that available for this kind of upgrades of unreliable charging stations. Unfortunately, the first round, we didn't have a local entity to apply for it. I'm hoping that next round we will have a local entity, because it had to be a public entity to apply for it, so that we could get many of these stations replaced that are the first generation technology that are not reliable. Definitely things that need to be changed.
Got it. And I see Satish had asked a similar question about the evolving reliability of those networks. Looking at the chat, I see some folks have been putting questions in the chat as well as the Q&A. So I want to go to Dan's question. Do you foresee an EV tax to replace a gasoline tax? Peer into the crystal ball.
Well, right now we have had for at least 5 years, I think now, the $75 registration tax, annual registration tax that is in there. I think it's called fee, but the same thing. It's a tax. And that actually is comparable to what it would be when you take into account the efficiency for internal combustion engines. So we have that in place already. There has been discussion that should be changed somehow, but I'm okay with changing things as long as we have it comparable to internal combustion engine cars. It wouldn't make sense to put the punitive some kind of a $250 for EVs, which would be way more than internal combustion engines would be paying for the same kind of driving, same efficiency. So it has to be fair for everyone.
Okay, that makes sense. I've got a question from Steve's asking kind of this one's going to make you do some math, maybe, Jukka. So what is the operating cost difference between EV and gas cars? Steve says he feels like his EV cost to operate is about 25 to 50% the cost of gas. I know this depends on the model, it depends on everything, but what say you?
That's math is there. That's good already. I don't have to do math. I would say that's a very, very good calculation there. I think that rings true to my experience and based on what I'm hearing from other people.
Perfect. Okay.
These kind of math questions I like, when someone has actually done the math and then I just have to
and they know.
Sounds good.
They want you to confirm or deny. Okay, I've got another one from Lee asking you to explain a bit more, if you can, the importance of matching level 2 charger amperage to car charging amperage.
Okay, so the idea here is that that car is the one who decides how they're going to charge the battery. So they are always in charge of the charging, so to say. So if you talk about level 2 charging, usually the rates are the slowest rates that I've seen in the cars 3.3 nowadays. 6.6 to 7 kilowatts is very, very common, up to 11 kilowatts of charging. And some of the, like the Ford F-150 Lightning that you can see behind me can go up to 19.2 kilowatts of power. So that's what the car might want to do. And what you put at your house is, of course, depending also what's your power capacity at your house. If you have just 50 amp service available, or 60 or that, then it might be limiting, but it's never a problem from the car perspective, because car will ask from the charger, is like, what can you provide? And the car charger says, well, I can provide you 6.6 kilowatts. And the car says, perfect, that's what I wanted. I'll take that. If the car says, I would like to get 11, so like, I can only provide you 6.6. Okay, I'll take 6.6. So they always match it. So it's not to worry about that. It comes more down to how you're driving your car. If you drive, let's say 50 miles a day, you could even get by with the 3.3 kilowatt level. If you're driving a big F-150 Lightning 150 miles a day every day, then I would probably go with the higher amperage rating there. So I would do the math more from the perspective of how do you drive compared to, taking that into account of when you choose that. And of course, the limitation is how much power you have available at your house.
Of course.
Just a quick, this is, as I said, I'm not good with these lightning rounds. One more tidbit here. So when you do the math there, just a quick rule of thumb, if you're talking about the cars, you can use it for calculation 3 miles per kilowatt hour. So if you drive 30 miles a day, then you probably used about 10 kilowatt hours of energy. That's what you have to replace during the nighttime. If you drive a pickup truck, then I would use 2 miles per kilowatt hour, because they are less efficient for the driving. They use more energy. So now if you did the same 30 miles of driving in a day, now you have to replace with 15 kilowatt hours of energy. So then if you're using 3.3 kilowatt charger, 15 divided by 3.3, now we're talking about 4.5, something like that, rough numbers. So 4.5 hours of charging in that one. Whereas if you're having a car EV, then it would only be 10 kilowatts. So then it would be 3 hours only to charge with 3.3.
I told you I'd make you do math eventually.
Yeah, all right. Well,
you did okay.
Again,
all right.
We'll keep it simple.
We'll give you a chalkboard next time. Okay, so now looking outside, some snow here, but I know my husband's already like, we got to think about winter tires. And I think that relates to Jim's question. So Jim is saying, does an EV wear out tires more quickly due to the weight than an ICE car? And that ICE is internal combustion engine. In case you didn't know, Jukka, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If EVs are in general maybe 10 to 15% more heavier from the weight perspective, that's exactly how much faster they also wear out the tires, 10 to 15% faster. So just take that into account, but it's not going to have a huge impact in that way. Challenge more, for example, with our Chevy Bolt is that it has 135 kilowatts of power. That's 200 horsepower in there, and it tends to slip the front tires very easily. So you have to be just careful when you're driving it. You don't just always floor it. You can drive it nicely, but if you tend to floor it, you will start to lose the front tires faster. So keep rotating the tires to the back and wear them evenly.
Excellent. Okay. Let's close with maybe this kind of big picture question from Chris. So Chris is talking just about initiatives at the state or utility level aimed at reducing the financial and operational barriers for owning and operating DC fast chargers for small businesses and fleets. So Chris is wondering if there's any effort underway to address these challenges and make DCFC development just more accessible to a broader range of stakeholders. And I see Anjali put her video on too. So maybe you kick us off, and Anjali.
I'll start. I'll
Okay,
start with
perfect.
couple of perspectives. First, many of the utility companies provide technical assistance in this one. So they help if someone is thinking about putting DC fast charging infrastructure in place. I would first recommend them talking with the utility company because they can help them with that process. They can tell what kind of capacity is available, what might be the best location, and make it more affordable, the installation based on that. Some of the utility companies also provide some kind of a incentives for or help with the installation. They might have a what's called make ready program, where if the location is right from many perspectives, utility company might provide the power all the way to the where you install in the charging station. So that's a very good thing. Other utility companies have commercial rates where they provide some kind of a incentive funding for that process if they have to has to be a new transformers, line extensions, or anything like that. So again, talk with the utility company about those options. And the last thing that I want to point out here is also the demand charges, which is a big thing there, is how, because these are drawing a big kilowatt power levels. And often and very quickly, these charging station owners will be hit with demand charges, meaning how much capacity you are using. And that can be a very big number, become very expensive in a hurry there. But fortunately, many utilities have also rate structures where they either provide so that the demand charges can be only certain percentage of the bill, which is a good way to limit it. Where if you're not using it a lot and it's just every now and then that hits a high numbers, that's fine. But when you start to have a consistent usage, then you'll be paying more. And the same kind of a impact will have is if there's a percentage of the utilization and that's used somehow to lower the demand charges too. That's another way to do it. Both do the same thing, but all of those things impact the cost of running the DC fast charging stations and make it more affordable for those who run it, and then also for the users. And I have to say one more thing, again, not the lightning Ryan things here. Right now, we are starting to see higher utilization of all the DC fast charging. That means that the station owners are starting to potentially be able to get their cost covered and maybe even make a little bit of money with these. And more EVs we get on the roads, more this will become the truth, and they will be a profitable operations, which means that we'll be getting more of those.
Great. And you could cover a lot of it. Very specifically, Minnesota Power actually, alongside its multifamily EV charging pilot program, it is actually going to be proposing make ready rebates for workplace, fleet, and hospitality charging and public charging in the filing later this month. So that'll be great for those in those service territories. Excel actually does have a commercial EV fleet pilot program that there will be discussions in the next year as we prepare for transportation electrification plans and how to make that permanent. That right now is only focused on public entities and nonprofit entities, but we've made the case before to add in commercial entities, especially small businesses, and we'll try to make the case again to expand that program kind of beyond its pilot phase to consider these other barriers that you mentioned.
Perfect. Well, I left you, we closed off, I guess, on an easy one, right? I think we're going to end the meeting here. We have gotten through most of our questions. There have been a few comments in the chat about sending slides. So on Monday, I will send the YouTube recording, which will include the slides. If you want the slides themselves, can I say email Jukka? And
Email
Jukka
you.
could
I'm not taking any requests. It's you.
All right. If you must have a PDF of the slides, you can email me at Olson, OLSON, at fresh-energy.org. And I know John was asking for a saved file of the chat log. So if you want the chat log or if you want the PDF of the deck, just shoot me a note. But if not, you will get the recording and all this other good stuff on Monday. With that, have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Enjoy the scant 2 hours of sunlight left in the day. And stay warm. Thank you for being with us. And thank you so much to our panelists. Really appreciate you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
All right.
Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.